Hi everyone and welcome to the All Things ITSM Global Podcast. I'm Kirsty McGowan and I'm here with Carlos Casanova and William Goddard, and we're talking this month to Charlie Betz, who's getting ready to head off on holiday. We see sitting in his RV there. So welcome Charlie and welcome to our guests.
Thanks Kirsty.
Thank you.
Hey Charlie, so it's Carlos. Again, welcome for joining us. And I know that you've been on the move the last few years. You've got a lot of things going on. Why don't you just kind of fill us in a little bit, on some of the latest stuff, that you've been working on with Axelos and it sounds like 20 or 30 other things you have on your plate these days.
Well, it's pretty crazy, and for somebody who professes to be interested in lean theory, I have way too much work in process. I am probably the biggest lean hypocrite in the world for that, although I suspect there's a lot of other folks who tend to take on more than they probably ought to as well. Can't say I'm doing anything with Axelos, so I'll just kind of rule that out right away. I have the occasional interaction with Kymar Carew over Twitter or other channels, but for the most part, I'm involved in. I guess I would break it down into 3 or 4 different things. First of all, I'm no longer with AT&T. I am now a solo consultant with my own firm, Digital Management Academy. I am subcontracting to Armstrong Process Group, and we are doing consulting currently in the Midwest with large manufacturers and insurance agencies, Fortune 30, Fortune 40 type companies. I currently am consulting at kind of the intersection of enterprise architecture, IT service management, and Agile. And that's paying the bills as a day job. Then, as you also mentioned, I am with the IT for IT Consortium, and that's been a really exciting effort. I just got back from Baltimore. We have about 50 active companies. We had about 35 people there in Baltimore building the standard. We have, and this is all public record, we have Exxon, we have Boeing, we have Shell, we have HP, we have Accenture, we have PwC. Very senior folks from Accenture really stepping up and donating significant IP on IT financial management, for example. I myself, we just wrapped up the Agile work stream, and that publication is going into the production machine of the Open Group for publication. So we're putting that on the back burner, and I myself will be leading a new work stream on asset and technology lifecycle management in partnership with a gentleman from Boeing who has many years of asset management experience. They've got some very interesting IT asset management problems at Boeing. And so, we'll be routing this stuff out into the industry, and it's very, very exciting. I think the standard itself will be taken live in Edinburgh this fall in October. Unfortunately, it is the same week as the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and this conflict has happened 2 years in a row. I'm not happy. I keep missing all these great DevOps events because I got other stuff going on, and well, what do you do? And then finally, I want to also mention that I am adjunct faculty at the University of St. Thomas, a large teaching university here, Catholic school owned by the Archdiocese. Obviously, adjunct faculty, there's certain limitations to what you can do, but I think it's a great position to kind of keep one's finger on the pulse of the industry. You hear a lot of stories from the students. You hear what they're being exposed to in big and small shops, startups, and enterprises. And it's a way of giving back to the community. And I'm very, very excited also that after 3 semesters of beating my students over the head with my current book, Architecture and Patterns for IT, which is a great architecture, a lot of people like it, but as a textbook, it's not the best in the world.
Shameless plug.
I've had, well...
There's no biased opinion there, right?
Here's what I'm plugging, and it's actually, it is. I am quite shameless about it because it's open source and free. Unlike my previous book, I'll be giving away what originally had started off to be my 3rd edition, but now is a 1st edition of the first IT management survey textbook based on Agile. And it's out there on GitHub. You can see it in authoring progress. I'm looking for people to help with it. I'm looking for people, to contribute and, make their own pull requests. And if they want to fork it and take it in a different direction, that's fine. But I think, IT education in this country is pretty badly broken, and as part of my own career interests in understanding and systematizing it better, I think, you learn by teaching, and then finally, a related topic is some of the work I'm doing. I'm going to just take a chance and mention that I've been having some very interesting few series of meetings with Murray Cantor, and we are talking a lot about where the industry needs to go in terms of having an actual theory of IT. And I know the theory is a word everybody loves to beat up on. Oh God, too theoretical. Well, I'm kind of on a one-person crusade to reclaim the use of the word theory and emphasize that when you say theory, you mean something that actually has evidence supporting it. That's been tested out against experiments, that you can actually show that you have both some rigorous thought process behind why this stuff works, as well as empirical evidence showing that the theory has some explanatory power. That's what a theory is. And we need that in IT. We wouldn't have computers. These miraculous devices we're talking over started off with people like Claude Shannon and Alan Turing and Alonzo Church. And if it wasn't for the theories that they developed, we wouldn't be having this conversation over Google Hangouts. So, what's not to like about theory?
Yeah.
But it's
well, I think to that point, point, Charlie. I think that term is and coming from an engineering background. I mean, I wouldn't have finished school had it not been for theories and all that, right? But I think it's just synonymous with guesses. For people that don't fully understand what it is and the basis of a theory, it's just that's just a guess. That's just something you're throwing out there, and I think that's that's pretty cool. Definitely look to maybe talk to when you get back from your National Lampoon crusade around the country. Definitely look to maybe spend a few more minutes talking to you about that offline. As far as the education piece, I'm curious because I have friends that have that work in the education space. My wife's a teacher. I also have technology friends that are working in higher ed. It's a different world in higher ed than it is in commercial industry and stuff. Have you spent a lot of time kind of looking at that and how the book and the material will be different there versus your initial target audience from your first books?
Yeah, I thought about it quite a bit. I made a decision a long time ago not to dedicate my life to academia. I'm first and foremost a practitioner, and yet, there is some similarity. I mean, there is obviously some need for the practitioner perspective in academia. I will say this as something of an outsider. Here's what I hear from senior leaders in IT about the current educational system. They'll sum it up. They'll say, people go and get four-year degrees. We hire them, and they don't even know what source control is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't think it's a matter. And then if you point that out to academia, and sometimes you get a lot of different reactions because it's really difficult to generalize. But I think for the most part, they are stuck in older mental models of how IT is delivered. There's a lot of people there, who did dig deeply into things like PMBOK. ITIL to some extent, certainly, process management. Your basic IT education, it starts with some exposure to computing and computers. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about a computer science education per se. There's a broad spectrum of different educational approaches. But let's say that you take a MIS program, say at a state university, or you're in a software engineering program with the IT concentration. You learn some fundamentals about computers. Maybe you take Java. Maybe you take a database course. You certainly aren't taught how to write a compiler or a programming language, but you're taught how to functionally use those things. And so you get some grounding in technical fundamentals, and then you take a number of what I would call silo classes. You take networking, you take security, you take project management, maybe you take service management. But it's all very insular and insulated, and there's no overall picture. And Agile, at the current state of practice, is that Agile is just taught as, a postscript or a little bit of an add-on, a little bit of an overlay, typically in the project management course. where they'll say, hey, there's this thing called Scrum, and then, okay, check the box, we've covered Agile. Now, those of us who are tracking really where the industry is going with the fundamental transformative nature of Agile and Lean IT, and I can be as skeptical as Mr. Rob Englund, but, he actually accepted the reality there a few years ago. I mean, this stuff's big. It's a big it's the transition from mainframe to distributed. It's the transition from procedural to object-oriented. It is that big or bigger. And academia, for the most part, doesn't know how to, really adapt to it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I'm on the advisory board at at UMass in the College of Engineering, and just the way the department, the College of Engineering runs itself, it's easy to see why the curriculum isn't fully satisfying things. Because, I mean, the actual leadership and they're obviously immensely intelligent people, but they don't have that business acumen to understand. So, we've had meetings where the advisory board is there and we're talking about strategies and whatnot. And it's like, okay, what's our mission as a College of Engineering? And, oh, we're waiting on this and that. It's like, well, that's 18 months out. So the smaller things, which build up to the big, it's not surprising, unfortunately, but it's just been so long that I think a lot of us have been talking about how, the universities aren't fully satisfying the everyday college graduate. If you're going into research and stuff like that, they're still nailing that, but I don't think that they're really fully supporting or satisfying the needs of most industries.
Can I just jump in here for a second? So, we've got all these frameworks that are out there, and, now we've got a new one, IT for IT, and what they're doing there, and we've got ITIL, we've got COBIT, we've got all these frameworks. Why isn't business working with higher ed to deliver to the marketplace people who know what the H they're doing? Right? Why is that?
Well,
Did we lose you, Charlie?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me? I see you guys. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. A couple things. I think that the smaller companies and the unicorn startups of the West Coast were too busy, making billions of dollars to really worry too much about academia. Although I believe that there are some, people who have a really solid clue out at Stanford and USC, because those folks are there watching it all unfold. But I haven't seen, real pedagogy, coming out of those shops. Maybe they've got some great internal programs, but it's not being, translated into, anything that I can see from my position. Now, I mean, I'm not necessarily plugged into all the academic channels I could be, but I just have to say I'm not experiencing it. So, and I think that the bigger companies, the companies that can really exert leverage on the educational systems, like at a state level, I think that they've been somewhat blindsided by DevOps and Lean. They are now doing large-scale enterprise DevOps and enterprise Lean IT transformations, and I serve on the advisory board, the continuing education IT section advisory board at the University of Minnesota, and the stuff is starting to get there. There are Agile, mini BAs and Agile certificates and things like that. But I still think that there is a need for some more overall paradigmatic, I never knew how to pronounce that word, approaches to it, because
the fact that you know the word is better than I.
I would say that without some attention to the theory, we're not going to get a new pedagogy. We need new pedagogy, and I've proposed one actually. It's out. I have it as an outline. I could even bring up a picture of it if sharing a screen would work here without blowing up this thing. I think in theory you can share.
It does work. It works fine.
What's that?
It works fine if you wanted to give it a try.
Let me show you. So if I go here, chat, screen share, and I am going to just share my entire screen. I'll live dangerously. And here is my here's the textbook. So can you see this IT management progression?
Yep.
We lost it.
We lost it?
No, there it is now.
I'm just going to click on it so it stays.
You got it?
Yep.
Yep.
So what's wrong with current IT education? I think, and even to a large extent, one of the big problems of frameworks like ITIL, COBIT, and even IT for IT, speaking as a member of IT for IT, they all start at the assumption that you're at the top level. And that's where so many disconnects come in. You know, because not everybody's at that same enterprise scale, and yet these frameworks, because, you know, the people who are passionate about them are solving enterprise problems, you know, they just go off and they define, you know, 26 processes, and, you know, and really elaborate everything, and you're left with, you know, people who have different contexts, different, you know, current situational realities. They're just not in a place where they really understand why the framework's important. And so one of the things I'm proposing to industry, especially for pedagogy, but even for understanding how better to communicate standards, is that, you know, you can see it as a maturation sequence. And if you follow something like Lean Startup, or just have the thought experiment, well, I had a person and their buddy in a garage, and they just started writing something, and at that point, it was just all about, you know, they had very quick, high bandwidth interactions between them, you know, because they were face to face, just across the table from each other. They didn't need a ticketing system. They didn't need, you know, a collaboration system. They certainly didn't need, you know, a configuration management database. They probably did need source control, because I'm pretty religious about that you do that from day one. I think a lot of people are nowadays. But other than that, and then they added 6 people, and so they started to realize, yeah, we can have missed handoffs. We need to keep track of who's doing the work. We need to, you know, understand what our strategy is from a product management standpoint. And then, assuming they keep growing, they get into the team of teams problem. And this is where I understand a lot of the, you know, ITIL versus DevOps, you know, enterprise architecture versus agile conversation, is you got people who are really thinking still at that second level of, you know, we got to have, you know, fast collaboration, and we got to be, you know, quick, we're close, you know, it's a high touch environment. And then all of a sudden you got teams of teams and coordination, you got specialization, you're trying to get work done through processes, which is never as effective as just asking somebody, right? You know, or, well, maybe it is. But anyways, we see a lot of, you know, just people talking past each other. And then a lot of, you know, religious wars in the industry, you know, between, you know, people who really have these different mental models. But at some point you do get to a coordination problem. Spotify's got some very cool stuff on how they've solved for that. And then finally, once you get past, you know, kind of the middle management coordination problem, then you get into some of the big ugly stuff. You get into, you know, long-range life cycles, and what's our plan for getting off the mainframe, or, you know, what happens if, you know, OpenStack falls apart, you know, and you know, is it good to put a bet there? And what about emergent complexity and, you know, systems that, you know, the system outages, complex questions of human-computer interaction that somebody like John Allspaw is, you know, really a notable expert on. But I think, you know, this is how I have chosen to, you know, propose a new way of teaching this stuff to the industry. And then at some point, you know, you also need more of a theory of how the work is happening, how the execution management is happening, and you start to actually then start to answer the ERP for IT question, which I'll leave hanging there.
I really like to comment about the religious wars, and I think we see a lot of that in discussion theories. You know, is it ITIL? Is it COBIT? Is it DevOps? Does one work with the other? I mean, we actually published a blog on All Things yesterday from Doug Tedder about saying, you know, it's not about the frameworks and the methodologies. It's all about getting the balance right and being sensible with it. And that's actually spoke to a few people. There's been quite a bit of discussion on that, and there is that whole it's one or the other, or it's, you know, what works together is quite a topic at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. I mean, I shouldn't say strange, but it's kind of scary that some of this is still happening. I remember, you know, I want to say it's, you know, 2005, 2006. Well, first of all, Rob and I, you know, Rob England and I have been having a discussion, you know, since the beginning pretty much on, you know, you need this, you know, $4 million CMDB versus you can just add people to, you know, the size of your team to do it. And both are right. right? Depending on the scale of your company. But I remember it was like 2005, 2006, individual director of IT from a Midwestern university. I was presenting at one of the conferences. And afterwards he kind of came to me and said, hey, at the time I was working for big global financial services company, and he's like, hey, I'd love to have $3-4 million to put auto discovery and software distribution in place. That's bigger than my whole IT budget. And I said, well, that's true, but you also aren't in 18 countries. He says, you can send out your 5 work study kids, have them back before lunch, and have a full asset inventory. I can't do that. I got to hire somebody for $300,000, and they'll be back in a month, and it'll be wrong by then. So the scale is what's amazing, that it still hasn't become just a ingrained part of the discussion. What I can do for a group of 20 is not the same thing that, well, you're doing the same thing. How you get there is very different when you have 200,000 people versus 20 people. But ultimately, you need to get the full asset. You need to get those handoffs and that sort of thing. And like you said, if you're in a bunch of different sites and whatnot, team of teams is just, you can't just walk up to Johnny and say, hey, can you give me that spreadsheet? Right. It's just not realistic. No, but you need the spreadsheet. So go ahead.
I just was agreeing.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I guess it's weird. I mean, we've all been, not to date ourselves, but we've all been in this industry for enough years, and whether it's at conferences or when we meet, we have these kind of discussions, and just to not see the industry that basically pays our bills move forward that much in 10, 15 years, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
No, we had that conversation at I did a presentation down in Christchurch in the South Island here in New Zealand on Wednesday, and that was the conversation afterwards. Someone in the audience saying, we had these conversations 10, 15 years ago. Why are we still having them? Why have we still got the same questions?
Because there's money involved, people. There's money involved. That's why.
I guess, but it's, after the comedic value of it, I mean, it's kind of tiring to look. I know, Charlie, you're probably in the same boat. Kirsty as well. You pull stuff out that's 10 years old, right? Yeah. You bring it to a new client, and they're like, "Wow, this is great," and you're partly embarrassed. Yeah. But you're also happy that they're finding value in it. So it's not that it's wrong, but you're like, "Wow, I've used this 20 times." And I'm thrilled that my clients are seeing value in it, but I need to be questioned on it at this point 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So Carlos, why are you reusing 10-year-old information?
It still works. It still works, and it's still relevant.
It is still relevant, and I'm certainly finding that with my latest client. But it is stuff that I used 10, 15 years ago that's needed there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, Will.
I just want to, because we're getting close to wrapping this up, but I want to sort of get an idea of where Charlie sees things going with, IT for IT and what they want it to be out there in the marketplace, because I think a lot of people are starting to look for alternatives in the marketplace on things that they can rely on, things that are going to be to deliver value to not only them as an individual, but to their clients or the businesses that they own or run. And there's been some interesting conversations out there. And what do you see the value of IT for IT? Where do you see it going, or where would you like it to see it go?
Well, IT for IT is first and foremost, it's an architecture. It's an architecture approach. It is much, it will never be, 2,000 pages of narrative guidance and checklists and tables and bullet points and, all of that kind of thing. It's not intended to, educate the day one IT practitioner on what change management is. It starts at least an intermediate level. But in that, it can be helpful, I think, for consultants. Certainly, HP is using it broadly in their IT service management consulting practice to answer certain questions about, well, how do we stitch this stuff together? Because, the subtitle of my book, The Cobbler's Barefoot Children, these back-end IT systems are, they're badly integrated. Their data quality is poor, and this does tend to interfere and start to constrain the understanding of the IT value chain. And big IT is big money. $5, $6, $8 billion. You hear about that, and that's some of the companies who are coming together on this and looking at it as a mechanism. I think where it goes, it's not intended to replace ITIL. I'll be the first to say that. It's intended to be the IT equivalent of ETOM or the National Retail Foundation ARTS model or the insurance ACORD model or the banking industry architecture network model. It's written as a enterprise model, and so I think it's very synergistic. We know it's very clear to me that ITIL and COBIT don't have those things, and most likely won't. And so I think there is a market need for it. I think we're very cautious in IT for IT about, for example, saying that we're seeking a normative standard for capabilities and processes. Really, what we're standardizing is data structures and reference systems. We simply say you likely need some kind of an automated change management system at a certain scale. An automated IT portfolio system at a certain scale. And here are some of the typical goes intos and gozadas, the interfaces. I would also say that we always get into this discussion about normative standards and conformance and things like that. And that's where I really kind of put on a bit more of my agile hat. I like IT for IT because it's a nice set of patterns to think about. It can help you design. Am I interested in heavy-duty conformance questions? Well, certainly not for end users. I don't see any value in a big company saying, "Oh, we're IT for IT compliant." On the other hand, it would be handy if CA and BMC and ServiceNow said, "Okay, in this particular case, we're following the IT for IT normative standard on, say, incident case exchange," because that's a problem that I know for a fact is a big ugly one in supplier integration and management. And nobody's really tackled that one, to my knowledge, at least not at an industry standard level. And that's where it's advantageous being with the Open Group, because they are a credible standards body. They have been through the wars. They've owned the POSIX interface, the underpinnings of Unix, and they've got plenty of battle scars from that. So, and they know how to get stuff into ISO if time and place should ever merit it. I mean, you don't just go, it's not easy to just go, say, I'm just going to go run something into ISO, but the Open Group knows how that particular event, how that particular process happens. So, we've got a lot of options.
That would be, so that would be one of your goals, is to have an ISO standard, eventually, so that people could actually use the IT for IT as a prescriptive type of body of knowledge, as opposed to a framework, right?
Well, when it goes live in the fall, it will be prescriptive. I mean, it's being rewritten as a set of prescriptive statements.
Fantastic.
But just because it's a set of prescriptive statements doesn't mean you have to do it.
No,
Read it. Take it for what it's worth. If you like the design pattern and how the incident and change management, how problem management, we for example will say problem management should circulate back to portfolio management because it's a major demand input. Well, no one's going to break your arm if you don't do that. So,
no. But what you're doing is you're going to be giving people some advice on what to do if this looks like your organization. This is what we've come up with, correct?
Yeah.
But I think that's what the industry needs.
Yeah.
The industry needs a little bit of help on making things easier and enabling them to make a good decision faster.
Yes.
Right.
So Charlie, let me ask you something. I mean, I know you're probably aware of the, and it just struck my mind from when you mentioned BMC, ServiceNow, HP, and whatnot. So years ago, probably pushing maybe 10 plus years ago, Oasis and Distributed Management Task Force, they were working together. Eventually, they merged everything with the Common Information Model, right? Yeah. So, all the vendors jumped on that, right? Yeah. At least in theory. And they all said, "Hey, well, you're shaking your head. I know." I guess that's kind of where I'm going, right? They all said, "Hey, we're in compliance, quote unquote, with SIM," And then the first thing they did was made sure that they can't exchange data, readily. And I know I can't remember the individuals' names, but after a year or two of that, two individuals, engineer from HP and an engineer from I want to say it was IBM, basically as individuals got frustrated and took it upon themselves and made it work. But they, then nobody ever heard from them again. I don't know if they were abducted and taken away.
Yeah.
But so I guess that's the concern I'd have again. I mean, you're investing a ton of energy in this, and obviously all the vendors are on board until they're not. So, and I know you can't force it, but I guess where does that go?
So I've looked. I do not claim to be a SIM expert, although I have downloaded all the white papers and read through them periodically over the years, and there's been at least 3 or 4 different occasions when it made sense for me to refamiliarize myself with SIM. I will say a couple things. SIM only dabbled in the process side of it. They were really trying to standardize things that, in my mind, they should never have tried to standardize. They were trying to put stakes in the ground on the beach.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to put a stake in the ground in the intertidal zone. Between high tide and low tide, there was no way.
They were going down. They were going down to the sand granular level.
Right, and what sense does that make? The next rev of the next major architecture change of the storage area network. I mean, heck, what's the big thing nowadays? Get rid of servers. Just do all services. AWS Lambda. If you try to, weld that stuff into place, you'll never get anywhere. And they spend a lot of time trying to standardize, in my mind, at the wrong level, relative to how fast technology moves. We are trying to standardize things like you shall have a change ticket, and there's an information structure associated with that. I think that's a much more stable place to try to say, and we've already started to look at the Kanban problem where you get these very generalized queuing interfaces, and that's actually the topic of the Agile work stream is, you can't even count on that you're going to distinguish your work nicely between incidents, problems, changes, service requests, blah, 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 blah. So you need to think of it as having a common queuing interface underpinning it. I don't want to get too geeky on y'all. But I think, we are, taking some steps to make sure it doesn't fall into some of those same traps that SIM fell into. And then I also think that the strong synergy with TOGAF and Archimate are big pluses, because TOGAF, for all its faults, is the leading standard in enterprise architecture. A lot of people are TOGAF certified. A lot of architecture organizations use it at least as a starting point. And so when you've got
any architect that hasn't dealt with it at some point.
Yeah, and so when you've got we're co-located. We hang out with the TOGAF forum. Well, it's actually the architecture forum. And there's a lot of cross-pollination there. So I think from a structural, from an organizational platform perspective, from a domain perspective, I think we're avoiding some of those mistakes. And could it still all crash and burn? Absolutely.
That's the fun part.
It's possible.
Well, that comes back to Will's comment a while ago. It's about the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once some vendor figures out, how to capitalize on it and say, "Oh, now it's mine," or at least I can somehow isolate myself. And even on the SIM stuff, it was kind of funny because the first thing I did was stripped out those bottom 37 layers, and tried to get to some reasonable visual of, oh, okay, that can work.
Yes.
And but like I said, I know that some of the product architects, there was just no way they were going to leave those interfaces for free-flowing data. It just, financially, it didn't make sense for the vendors to compete that way.
Right.
So,
yep.
And then maintaining it would have been a nightmare. So.
Well, guys, this has been great, and I think we could probably carry on chatting for another hour or so quite happily, but we probably need to wind it up. It's been great talking to you, Charlie.
Absolutely.
And enjoy your road trip.
Yep, I plan to.
Yeah.
Thanks, Charles.
As soon as we let you go, right?
Yeah.
We still got some packing to do. Tomorrow morning. If all
Well,
goes
enjoy
well.
Like National Lampoon's, that the dog is inside, not outside, chained to the bumper.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks everyone for your time, and I hope our audience has got the same sort of value out of it as we have as hosts. It's been a great pleasure talking to Charlie today. Thanks everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you all.